Good evening, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As you know, it's just after 8:30 here in the United Kingdom. We're coming to you live from the studios of British Muslim TV here in Wakefield. It's this week's edition of Questions with me, your host, Mohammed Shafiq. We're broadcasting Sky Channel 752 and across social media at British Muslim TV. Wherever you are joining us from around the world, a very warm welcome. Now, I don't often get the chance to talk about me on this program, as I believe it's never about me. It's always about you, the viewers, and my guests, and the stories we feature, and their lived experience. But tonight we're celebrating an historic moment, our 100th episode of Questions. Since we started this journey in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, we featured stories of Muslims around the world, and we firmly established ourselves as the most important platform for the British Muslim community. Firstly, I want to say a thank you to you, our dear viewers of British Muslim TV, for watching me every Wednesday, encouraging me, praying for me, and occasionally criticising me. That's okay as well. And I want to thank our Editor-in-Chief, Joseph Hayat, for entrusting me with this programme. I hope we have met the high standards he expects always. To James, my producer, and the whole team behind the scenes here at British Muslim TV, a very big thank you. Here's to the next 100 episodes. Right, enough about me. Let's move on. We want you to comment on the big stories we're covering tonight. Call us now on 01924 231 082. You can message us on WhatsApp, which is on the screen now. And if you're watching this on Facebook, yes, you guessed it right, post your comment in the chat box and we'll read some of them on air later. Now, tonight, first, we head to the holy city of Karbala and the shrine of the grandson of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Imam Hussain alayhi salam, to talk to Mustafa al-Husseini about the Karbala Center for Studies and Research, about the important sacrifice that Imam Hussain and his blessed Ahlul Bayt made, and how the story of Karbala is as relevant today in the 21st century as it was at the time of his ultimate sacrifice on the plains of Karbala. We then head to Leeds to talk to Professor Seán McLoughlin about his important work on Hajj and reflecting on the Motawif chaos witnessed this year during the Hajj. And then we finish off with a discussion about what is happening in Leicester. Community activist Adnan Hussain will be here. We'll be discussing how did it happen, who's exploiting the division, and what can be done to bring communities together. So we want to hear from you tonight. You can call us on 01924 231 083. Messages on WhatsApp and also on British Muslim TV across social media. Alternatively, just pick up the phone. 01924 231 083. Right, the questions we're considering tonight. How important is the story of Imam Hussain alayhi salam to our lives today? How can the Hajj be improved for the Ummah? And how important is it for communities to unite and not allow extremists to divide us based on faith or ethnicity? Please share your thoughts on 01924 231 083, or you can message us on WhatsApp, or you can post us on social media, and we'll read some of the comments out in a second. Okay, so let's get started on the program. The name Imam Hussain in Islam is forever linked to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was his beloved grandson, and he was destined from birth for greatness in serving the deen of his beloved grandfather. Imam Hussain understood that standing up against tyranny and injustice is what the blessed Ahlul Bayt was destined for. Now, 1400 years later, the name of Imam Hussain is still alive, and the tyrant Yazid is cursed every day. The Karbala Center of Research is blessed to be affiliated with the holy shrine of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and they do some fantastic work there in Karbala. And it's engaged primarily in promoting the message of the Ahlul Bayt and Imam Hussain. They work across the Muslim community and with non-Muslims. Now let's reflect on the holy shrine of Imam Hussain and the work of the Karbala Center for Studies and Research with Mustafa al-Husseini. I'm pleased to say Mustafa al-Husseini joins us live from the holy city of Karbala in Iraq. Sidi, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very warm welcome to the program and great honor to have you here on British Muslim TV.
Assalamu alaikum, dear sir, Mr. Mohammed Shafiq, and thank you for inviting me. And I would like to say congrats on your well-deserved success for making 100 episodes so far, and best wishes of a successful career and life ahead.
Well, thank you so much. And to get those words from you is a great honor because of where you work and spend your days and nights. And please convey our salam to Sayyidina Imam Hussain al-Islam, his blessed, resting place, and pray for us and the Ummah. I talked about the sacrifice of Karbala as an example to all of us. How was the shrine of Imam Hussain al-Islam developed to what it is today, what we see on the screen?
Mr. Shafiq and all the people may know all over the world that the Haram or the whole shrine of Imam Hussain, or as we call it in Iraq, Al-Ataba al-Hussainiyya al-Muqaddasa, is the place that houses the resting place of Prophet Muhammad's beloved grandson, Imam Hussain bin Ali, peace be upon them all, which is located in the center of the holy city of Karbala. The first person to build the tomb of Imam Hussain was the Imam Ali bin al-Hussein al-Sajjad with the help of the Bani Asad tribe. And when Al-Mukhtar al-Thaqafi took over the wilayat of Kufa in 65 of the Islamic calendar, he built a shrine over the whole tomb and put a ceiling on the top of that tomb, which he turned into a mosque-like building. This mosque has two doors. One of them is in the south side, and the other one is in the east. The stages of the development and construction continued over time until the holy shrine reached its current appearance today, as it consists of a wide courtyard with an area of 15,000 square meters that was recently fully roofed, and in the middle is a building with an area of 3,850 square meters, in which the tomb of Imam Hussain was surrounded by corridors of an area of 600 square meters. For the dome of Imam Hussain shrine, it raises for over 37 meters from the ground, and it's covered from the bottom to the top with pure gold. And a 2-meter long mast of gold also rises above the dome. Not to mention that the dome is flanked by 2 gold-plated minarets, as the number of golden bricks that covers them is 8,024 bricks. Beside the tomb of Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, the holy shrine includes also many other milestones, such as the shrines of the companion Ibrahim al-Mujab, Habib bin Mudahir al-Asadi, and the shrines of the relatives and companions of Imam al-Hussein, who were with them in the Battle of Karbala, such as Al-Qasim ibn al-Hassan and Ali al-Akbar, the son of Imam Hussain bin Ali.
Yeah.
If we move further, we will see that the holy shrine is surrounded by 10 massive gates on its perimeter. And I would be very happy to explain them if you want to.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, just tell us, I mean, that's really interesting to hear the history, if you like, of the shrine of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. I suppose Imam Hussain alayhi salam is very beloved to all Muslims. Is the shrine open to all Muslims?
Mr. Shafiq, let me say that I have to say that the question itself is out of the question, because even many non-Muslims make annual trips to Karbala, as they think of Imam Hussein's act as a revolutionary movement and have taught many people valuable lessons. what had happened in Karbala was an epic that had not just taught Muslims, but many people around the world. For example, one of those lessons that Imam Hussain has taught people around the world is to fight even though you know you are going to die, which Imam Hussain has done himself with a group of only 72 loyalists against an army of over 30,000 soldiers. He also taught people not to give up and forfeit even in a harsh time, which is clearly demonstrated by the famous leader Nelson Mandela when he thought about quit his struggle after 20 years in prison, but suddenly he thought about the tragedy experienced by Imam Hussain in Karbala, which eventually gave him strength to stand for the right of freedom and liberation, and he did.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. Do you know, how should we remember the sacrifices of the blessed Ahlul Bayt?
You know, Mr. Shafiq, the building of society is based on the existing of interaction, a feeling, and a common goal, as well as the existence of a common vision. So if the society was separate and isolated, in which selfishness and individualism deepen, then this society will be full of problems, crises, and conflicts. But sacrifices are a process of social construction that leads to the rapprochement of society within itself. And here only we can see that the great spiritual and moral rapprochement in the society, and we will eventually have a social unity that its basis is the love of Imam Hussain. So we became an integrated society with common goals. And for this reason,
Sorry, Sidi, we just need to go to a break. If you stay there, Sidi, that is Mustafa al-Husseini joining us live from the holy shrine of Imam Hussain alayhi salam in Karbala in Iraq. He's our special guest, reflecting on the sacrifices of the Ahlul Bayt. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll continue our important conversation. Join us on the side of this. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusive here on British Muslim TV. We're coming to you live from our studios here in the United Kingdom in Wakefield. We're opening the lines now, 01924231083. Get in touch with us on social media, British Muslim TV. Now, we have an exclusive conversation with Mustafa al-Husseini from the holy shrine of Imam Hussain alayhi salam in Karbala in Iraq. Sidi, we were talking just before the break about the history and the sacrifices and the ability for not just Muslims, but many non-Muslims to go and experience the beauty and the spirituality of Karbala. Tell us about the Karbala Center for Studies and Researches where you work.
You know, thanks to Allah Almighty and with the blessings of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the Karbala Center for Studies and Research was established in late 2013 to begin its dynamic steps to reach the ranks of the leading scientific institution, not within the holy shrine of Imam Hussain only, but all over the world. In this context, the Karbala Center for Studies and Research has had a number of academic achievements and strategic projects, including its success to write the Karbala Comprehensive Civilizational Encyclopedia that aimed at documenting the history of the holy city of Karbala in all its religious, social, and other aspects of life. In addition to the project of tracking the stages taken by Imam Hussain through his immortal trip from Mecca and Medina to Karbala, starting from the Iraqi borders, while the third major achievement was the encyclopedia of the Arba'in pilgrimage, through which the KCSR seeks to document all information about this blessed pilgrimage and the believers participate in it since the Battle of Karbala to the present day, not to mention hundreds of publications achieved by the center during its young age, which varied in their forms and content as books, letters, theses, magazines, brochures, encyclopedias, and studies in many fields and aspects of life.
Yeah, that's really important. And bringing Muslims together, because we know about the history of Iraq with the sectarianism and Daesh and the ISIS violence that we've seen. How does the Center for Studies and Research bring various different Muslims, Sunni, Shia, together?
The idea of establishing the center came at the time with the aim of playing an active and important role regarding human and scientific studies and research concerning the whole city of Karbala by finding a common ground for continuous communication among thinkers and decision makers, in addition to intensive cooperation with all counterpart institutions locally, regionally, and internationally to ensure the achievement of common goals that doesn't concern religions or ethnic background or other differentiate the other thing that make which part different from the other. This is a huge amount of achievements and projects that I mentioned before was not only a product of the center's own capabilities and the human competency that it embraces, but it was also a result made by its professional abilities in the field of public relations that enabled the KCSR to sign agreements, MOUs, with countless universities, institutions, government, and private research centers, as well as its productive cooperation with scientific and academic figures with a long history in various branches of science and knowledge.
Yeah, that's really important. And you talked briefly earlier on about the interfaith work that is going on at the shrine as well, and the center. What can non-Muslims learn from the life of Imam Hussain?
You know that one of the main goals sought by a righteous saint such as Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, is to save mankind from ignorance and misguidance. And many of our righteous imams have emphasized that if we truly knew the true value of the master of martyrs, peace be upon him, we would be able to save the world, the whole world. As Imam al-Sadiq, peace be upon him, says in the Ziyarat, a phrase which is very intriguing me. I know, لِيَسْتَنْقِذْ عِبَادَكِ, which means in English, so he can save your worshippers. And here we should focus on this phrase. All the worshippers, not only certain individuals or groups, or even a particular religion, since the power that exists in the Husseini revolution can save all the worshippers in every corner of the world. So in conclusion, we can say that all people are in debt to Imam Hussain, not only Muslims, because of the unbearable sacrifices he made to save humanity.
Yeah, it's really important. How can people find out more about the center and the shrine of Imam Hussain and the work that goes on there?
I can give you a little bit, about my work.
Yes, please.
In the center, if that's what I heard clearly. Since I started working in the Karbala Center for Studies and Research about 4 years ago, the center's founder and director, Mr. Abdul Amir al-Quraishi, which is a well-known Islamic researcher, has entrusted me with an administrative and a field mission of a planned and continuous nature, through which I aim to gain and maintain the understanding, sympathy, and support of mutual interest with the KCSR. And this mission also aims to build and strengthen sound relations between the center and a group of public, such as scientists, academics, and government officials, and to maintain communication with them. In addition to delivering the center's message to the community. Among other duties entrusted to me within the center is also to monitor and analyze news and stories related to Karbala, as a city and as a tragedy that are published in all international media outlets, and then translating and publishing them to the Iraqi readers and the Arab region as a whole.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? And then you've seen what happens when people divide, whether that was under Saddam Hussein, whether it's in Daesh. What is the situation like in Iraq at the moment with the political turmoil that we've seen?
This is partially not, a complex situation, but I think there has been misunderstanding that Western media has delivered to the community, because Daesh is a foreign and out of Islam group, and what happened in Iraq was almost, a political conspiracy. Run by people from outside the border, mostly non-Muslims, but through the fatwa or edict made by Ayatollah Sistani in the whole city of Najaf, and the quick response from all people of Iraq, to pick up arms and to defend their country. There was the surprise that amazed the world, which is defeating this massive and aggressive group in no more than 3 years, even when many political and analytical centers in the West predict that this group will last for almost 30 years before the whole world can unite and defeat it.
Yeah, we're just coming to the end of our time together, Sidi. What's your message to our viewers watching this around the world about the blessed shrine of Imam Hussain, his story, his sacrifice, and how it's relevant to today?
I am humbly just want to say Assalamu alaikum, which translated in English to peace be upon you, and I mean it to you all, people from the whole world, as our Imam Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salam when he said that every man is even your brother in religion or your counterpart in humanity. So no matter what differences we have between one another, we also are brothers in humanity, and there are more to find in common than those differentiate us, so that we should learn from the message sent by Imam Hussain to be free in our mind and to break the shackles of slavery in order to achieve peace on earth and to make justice among all people from the globe.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Sidi, and reminding us about the blessed shrine of Imam Hussain. Can you please convey our salam and request for prayers in the blessed court?
Inshallah, I'll keep my prayers and dua for you and all the staff members of your esteemed channel. and to all your beloved ones in your country. Thanks a lot, dear sir, for inviting me. It was very appreciated.
Thank you so much. That was Mustafa al-Husseini from the Karbala Center of Studies and Research. He was joining us live from the blessed city of Karbala in Iraq. If you ever get the chance to go and experience the spirituality of that journey, go to Najaf to see the resting place of Sayyidina Imam Ali, alayhi salam, and Karbala and the blessed Ahlul Bayt. Right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to head just up the road here in Wakefield to Leeds and talk to Professor Seán McLoughlin from Leeds University about his important work on mapping the UK Hajj sector and definitely looking at the Mutawif process. You know about that. We'll be back very shortly. Don't be going anywhere. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. We're coming to you live from our studios in Wakefield. As I said, you can share your thoughts on the topics we're covering tonight by calling us on 01924231083 and get in touch with us on social media handles British Muslim TV. And so before we move to the next row, remember, it's our 100th anniversary. I'm not that old. It's our 100th episode, and we want you to share your thoughts. And there's quite a few nice messages coming through as well on Twitter and on WhatsApp, and we're trying to get through some of them. So if you do want to share your reflections on the last 100 episodes, please do get in touch with us. Right, as Muslims, we know Hajj is an important pillar for Muslims. It's a journey of a lifetime, and for so many, it will take decades, literally decades, to save enough money to get the honour of completing the Hajj. This year, as you know, the Saudi Arabian Ministry of Hajj and Umrah announced just weeks before Hajj that they had authorised and accredited the handling of Hajj applications from the United States and wider American continent, Europe and Australia, exclusively to an external company called Mutawif. Now, the reason for this was, this is their argument, was to introduce the changes. It made sense on paper because so many of us now in the 21st century, 2022, are using the internet to do everything online. And so if you cut out the middleman, either travel agents, where there is allegations of fraud and mistreatment commonplace, and replace it with a direct online service, you would get the best service. Now, the reality was somewhat different. You recall from our program earlier on this year, where we talked to pilgrims from around the world about their experiences. Let's continue the conversation from then. Professor Seán McLoughlin is the Professor of Anthropology of Islam at Leeds University. He's done research papers on anthropology and sociology of Islam and Muslim diaspora, Muslims in Britain and Europe, migration, diaspora, transnationalism, pilgrimage, culture, religion, ethnicity, identity, politics, the state. You get the picture. He is a very, very, very intellectual person. I'm pleased to say Professor Seán McLoughlin is joining us live from Leeds. Professor Seán McLoughlin, a very warm welcome to the programme, and great to finally have this chat.
Assalamu alaikum, Shafiq Saab.
Wa alaikum salam. How are you doing?
Many congratulations to BMTV, a great West Yorkshire and British Muslim institution.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for your kind words. And what better way to celebrate our 100th episode tonight than talk to you, sir. Tell us a bit about your role as a Professor of Anthropology of Islam at Leeds University.
Well, Shafiq, the anthropology of Islam, if I can just break it down a bit,
Sure.
really tries to explore the link between Islam as a tradition and Islam as everyday lived practice. And what I've done in my career, which rather frighteningly spans 25 or 30 years now, is get quite close to Muslim communities, particularly up here in the north of England, and try and learn about some of the challenges and the ways in which they've remade their Muslim lives and institutions here in the UK. So I've been teaching a course on Muslims in Britain at Leeds for about 20 years. I started researching the Hajj as long ago as the late 1990s, when a an imam and leader of a mosque over in Bury introduced me to the fact that he took pilgrims in small groups to Mecca and Medina. So this was a sort of independent travel phase, and since then I've been tracking Hajj and its transformation in the UK over the last couple of decades or so.
Yeah, as you were saying, you were mapping the UK Hajj industry. What have you learned during that period as you were mapping it?
Well, this is work that I've done mainly during the last decade, Shafiq, and I started out with this interest in pilgrims' experiences. So, how did pilgrims experience travel to the holy places? But then I thought, well, actually, to understand that properly, we need to talk to the munazzims, the Hajj organisers, and their guides, and also the authorities here in the UK that regulate travel and tourism, and of course some of the community organisations that have evolved in British Muslim communities to try and support the Hajj. So it's the report that I wrote in 2019, mapping the UK Hajj sector, was the culmination of about a decade's work. And probably one of the key but rather simple things I discovered was that Hajj is not like any of the other pillars in many ways. It's not something that people are practicing necessarily every day or every year even. So as a once in a lifetime journey, it's something that even most ordinary Muslims don't know a lot about. So when we come to talk about Hajj, there's often key information gaps there. And, you know, for instance, people that we spoke to on the ground, you know, didn't really understand how Hajj packages were put together, how visas were acquired and sold to them. So people didn't really understand the nuts and bolts of how Hajj was organized, and it's a very complex business. So we were trying to, you know, illuminate ordinary people a bit more through the report and a related explain that we've got on our website.
Yeah, that's a really important report. I was reading it yesterday, which I think is really important. What did you make of the late announcement of the Mutawif process? Because many people in the UK had already paid thousands to travel agents and were looking forward to their trip. And then suddenly the Mutawif announcement dropped only a few weeks early.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite shocking, really. I think there were literally just a few weeks to go for Hajj, maybe 4 or 5 weeks. I think speaking to the Hajj organisers, as I have over the last decade, it's very clear that they're quite used to having things dropped on them at the last minute. But what was of particular concern to me was the way in which the whole process was rolled out. And, you know, we saw that from the very beginning in terms of the website and the booking process. And it seemed to carry through to the allocation of rooms and other pinch points while in Mecca. And you know, I think people are still having some difficulties too now securing refunds because, you know, quite a lot of people in the end, they ended up on what might be sort of described as makeshift packages. They didn't actually always get what they paid for. So, you know, really, overall, it's been quite a sort of epic fail in terms of operationalization. I think, as you said in your introduction, this is definitely the direction of travel. Online travel agencies were something we're very familiar with now, and there's no doubt that the Saudis want to use online technologies to try and simplify processes. This is part of their pilgrim experience program, but at the same time, if you're going to fail in the way that they seem to have done to deliver on the ground, then obviously it raises lots of questions.
Were you surprised from the negative feedback from pilgrims? Because we got lots of it here when we covered it a few weeks ago. Because the reality is it impacts on people's mental, physical, and spiritual well-being, and really has really affected them.
It certainly does, and I think the pilgrims this year have had a particularly heavy emotional burden to carry. I think that Hajj is quite challenging at the best of times, but ordinarily pilgrims from the UK would have their munazzims and their guides, their organisers, to provide a bit of a buffer for them, to explain things, to keep them orientated, to in a sense to take a lot of the worry away. But pilgrims that travelled this year, actually arrived in Mecca fairly stressed, because some people had, turned up at airports and not being able to travel. Others, had to sort of pay last minute, and there was just a lot of stress that people carry forward into the Hajj itself. And then thereafter, of course, they didn't have their normal guides available. So I think what's interesting, though, and it's come up in some conversations I've had with pilgrims subsequently, is the fact that not everybody had a sort of uniformly bad experience. People obviously had different packages. So some of the folks on the platinum package had some aspects that were good, and people have also mentioned that.
Sorry, Professor. I was just going to interrupt there and say we had people on the program who paid for silver who were very happy with what they had. There was those with diamond and platinum who weren't very happy, but there was a mixed bag here.
Yeah, I think it's a very mixed bag. And even saying that, however, it's very clear from the volume of complaint and stress that was articulated on social media, and I spent most of June and July retweeting that myself. It's very clear that it was a different sort of order of challenges compared to previous years, because, as we say, Hajj is a challenge, and previous systems of taking people for Hajj haven't been without their problems. But I do think it was uniquely challenging this year.
And then just briefly before we go to this break, 30 seconds, do you welcome the fact that Mutawif has been stripped of the contract?
Well, I wonder if it's as clear-cut as that. Obviously, the ministry stepped in during Hajj itself and took over, or at least supervised, many of the processes. I mean, I haven't seen a sort of clear-cut naming of Mutawif as being stripped of its contract. I know there were some press releases put out by the Saudis, but they didn't name the company. And I know from my contacts that there were problems too with African service providers.
Well, Professor, just stay there. I know we're just going to take a very quick break. When we come back after the break, we're going to hear your solutions, Professor Seán McLoughlin's solutions about how to improve the Hajj and how to make life better for you at home. Join us on the side of this. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. We're taking your calls on 01924231083. I did promise to read you some of these comments, but as I said, I've always wanted to make my programme not about me, but about you and the guest. And so it feels a bit strange reading comments about me. But anyway, we'll see what we can do a bit later. We've got an exclusive conversation with Professor Seán McLoughlin, who's joining us live from Leeds. Seán, before the break, we were talking about Mutawif and potentially sort of the greyness, if you like, in that decision. If you were just focusing and talking to the Ministry of Hajj and Umrah based on your experience of how to improve the Hajj for international pilgrims. What is the first step you would take?
I think that the Saudi authorities, may have a vision for change, but I don't think that they understand the Western pilgrim market well enough. From some conversations I've had, I got the impression that they expected all of the Western pilgrims to be completely self-directing, all brilliantly organized and well educated, and just basically being able to operate on Hajj on their own. Whereas I think because Hajj is so challenging in so many different ways, what they need to do is put pilgrims right at the center of their thinking about Hajj. And I know that they've got lots and lots of infrastructural and logistical challenges to deal with, but if they put more time perhaps into thinking about it from a bottom-up perspective and what I call a pilgrim-centered perspective, they might need to get to know their market a lot better. And of course, this is what the Munazzams and their guides did for the last 20 years or so. They were the ones that were a bit of a buffer between the Western pilgrims, and they come from Western societies. They've got those sorts of expectations in terms of consumer needs and wants, and visiting Saudi Arabia and operating in a different society. So everyone's there for Hajj. Everyone's celebrating ideas of ummah and community, but at the same time, they are having to negotiate being in a different country and doing things differently. So the Munazzams were the people that were able to kind of take some of the heat out of that and, provide a bit of a protective bubble around people. So what I would say is a pilgrim-centered approach. That's what I talked about even before Mutawif in the report that I wrote.
Yeah, it's really important. Now, and then based on that experience and research, there's two questions I want to ask you. You've worked very closely with the All-Party Parliamentary Group. What do you make of the political response from politicians in this country to representatives of the Saudi government?
Yeah, I think it's really challenging and difficult in terms of the politics. And one thing I would say is that, if you look at the history here, we can go back to the early 2000s, and there was a British Hajj delegation. We can look about 10 years ago, and Lady Varsi tried to set up a Hajj task force. So because, there's no government department, there's no Hajj mission representing British Muslims, it's always pretty difficult to get the question of Hajj. We're talking about 25,000 British Muslims traveling annually before the pandemic. It's very difficult to get those sorts of issues high up the political agenda. And of course, government in particular is also balancing its own relationships with Saudi Arabia. So in many ways, I think what we can see with the APPG, for instance, is that it's a lobby group. It's a space where people can come together, different stakeholders, and at least have some honest public discussions about Hajj. So, what I'm saying really is that there are big challenges in terms of really forcing home some of the observations that pilgrims have been making. And I know that they must find that extremely frustrating. But that there are real challenges in terms of pushing home those political points, I would say, whether we're talking about Foreign Office or whether we're talking about Department of Business. The APPG is mainly composed, of course, of at the moment of opposition MPs. So they can write, as Yasmin Qureshi did to the Saudi embassy back in May, I think, to express her concerns. And I do think actually that that was pushing the Saudis pretty hard. This question of the relationships between Saudi Arabia and Britain, are quite difficult for minority communities to make significant progress on. And actually, I think another point I would make, an observation, is that there are very few British Muslim organisations that really spoke out on the Mutawif issue. And one way of empowering pilgrims might be to try and amplify the message, and for other organisations, perhaps some of those that have been quite successful, you can think of civil society organisations or the philanthropists that have come to support research and development in communities, for those sorts of bodies to also take up the message on Hajj. So yeah, sorry for the long answer.
No, it's fine. No, I think it's important.
It's a tricky old topic, that one.
It is, yeah, and it's quite detailed in terms of how you want to change that. And do you think there will be a way to bring that price down, because it's gone really high this year?
Yeah, I suspect not, to be honest. I know that we'd all like to think that the price of Hajj could come down, but most of the research I did for my mapping report really was unpicking some of the realities of supply and demand that mean that hotels and airline flights in particular are very, very expensive at the peak period during Hajj. I mean, I know even in 2019, a direct flight to Jeddah at the just before Hajj was around £1,400. So once you start to build those sorts of prices into the cost of packages, and when you think about the sort of inflation that's going on, when you think about the fact that the Saudis have introduced new taxes, VAT, so things are changing over there as well, that mean that I worry that the price of Hajj is not likely to come down. The Saudis have really using Hajj these days as a way of providing an alternative to oil in their own economy. Back in the day, maybe in the heyday of the 1970s, when there was lots of oil money flowing around, there was a lot perhaps that was being spent on Hajj, but now Hajj is increasingly having to pay for itself a little bit more. So I do worry that unless perhaps there are particular interventions or new models of packages that are developed, I do worry that the price of Hajj is likely to stay relatively high.
Yeah, we're probably got about 4 minutes with you left. I just wanted you to think about what other things are you working on in the future that we can look forward to?
Well, it's a sort of tricky point to be thinking about this. So I definitely spent a lot of the summer keeping track of what was happening in terms of Mutawif, because, of course, one of the things that was also signalled in 2022 was, in a sense, the end, or seemingly the end, of the Munazam system. One of the things I want to do is try and write a book about British Muslims and the Hajj, to sort of capture what I've been calling 3 ages of Hajj going. So we've got that independent phase that I mentioned at the very beginning of the interview, the package travel phase, and now we're entering a new phase where increasingly, whether there's another Mutawif or another brand of online travel agent, or whether there's some sort of hybrid system going forward, we're definitely into a new age of Hajj going from Britain that's post-pandemic. So I'd like to kind of capture that in a book. I mean, I suspect that there'll also be conversations going back and forth about whether there's an opportunity to update my mapping report to address what's happened in terms of Mutawif. I've been busy collecting quite a lot of information. There's been a lot of WhatsApp groups, a lot of experiences shared. I've gathered some interviews already, but you know, for academics, these things do tend to take a bit of time. So rest assured, I'll be working on the organisation of Hajj. But you know, I do have other interests as well too. You know, I was working until quite recently on an account of Islamic soundscapes in Bradford. So you know how sound and the use of technology has you know, built an environment in a city like Bradford and many other cities, no doubt, where you know Islamic sounds are providing part of the soundscape that makes cities British Muslim in some way.
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really found it a fascinating discussion. I look forward to coming back a future day. Thank you so much, and best wishes for your work. Allah bless you.
Thank you very much, Shafiq Saab. And any viewers that are interested in the work on Hajj, do go, well, just search Google for Hajj and Leeds, and it'll be right up there at the top of the Google list.
Yeah, and I'll promise to tweet it as well and share it on my social media. Thank you so much. That was Professor Seán McLoughlin joining us live from Leeds. I absolutely loved that. And the reason I loved it was because he sounded like he was Pakistani, the way he was saying hello to me. Anyway, we love you, Professor Seán McLoughlin, and thank you so much for all the work that you've done. I hope people have found that fascinating as I have. And as I said, we're going to continue to keep looking at this Mutawif. And if you have an experience that you want to share with us, please do get in touch with us. You can get in touch with the show at British Muslim TV. You can drop me an email, mohammed.shafiq@britishmuslimtv, britishmuslim.tv, and we'll keep in touch with you. But yeah, as I said, join us on social media as well. If you want to get in touch with me on social media, it's mshafiquk on Twitter. Right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Adnan Hussain about what is happening in Leicester. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq. It's the 100th episode. What a milestone. Anyway, we're celebrating tonight. I was promised a piece of cake and I cannot see for the life of me where this piece of cake is. I blame the producer, James, and the team here at British Muslim TV. I mean, the least they could have done is get a piece of cake. But anyway, I expect a big cake when I come back from Pakistan. Right, so what we're going to do now, we're going to focus about what is happening on Leicester. Lots of you have been in touch saying, why is British Muslim TV not covering what's happening in Leicester? Primarily the reason is we just didn't know what was going on. There's been lots of fake news. We want to get through that and make sure that whatever we do, it's about bringing people together and really, really important. And we want to take your calls as well. So if you're in Leicester and you're watching this, you want to share your experiences of what happened, 01924 231 or get in touch with us anonymously on British Muslim TV. And the WhatsApp number is on the screen, so if you can give us anonymous messages if you want as well. Now, Leicester is one of the most diverse cities in the country. For decades, Muslims and Hindus have lived side by side in peace, with its diversity being its strength. Now, some say that the violence began with a cricket match between India and Pakistan, where there was violence between young Hindu and Muslim men. And there's video footage showing young Hindu men exchanging punches towards young Pakistani Muslim men, and that there were anti-Pakistan chanting and slogans. Things have then escalated in the following 2 weeks as the police are investigating allegations of young Hindu youths carrying out racially aggravated assaults on young Muslim men and frequently causing antisocial behaviour, including near mosques. Events have been inflamed by false rumours spreading via social media and claims of inaction by the police, which is what Leicestershire police deny. Now, things came to a head when a large group of young Hindu men, thought to be around 200, took part in an unplanned, unauthorised march in the Green Lane Road area. I don't know if that's a spelling mistake, but it's the Green Road area of Leicester. Shouting RSS. This is the right-wing slogans in India. And they were doing that at Muslim shops and residents, which obviously caused a lot of concern. And there's been allegations that India-type slogans and politics has been used to divide communities. And this is really important to say. There's been fake news spread that Muslims are coming to a Hindu temple, so we need to get to defend it. There's been fake news about Hindus coming towards a mosque and pulling down, bricks and attacking the mosque. Again, fake news. And really, that fake news is being peddled, and we've seen as a result protests and by Muslims in temples in Birmingham and false reports of a protest in Wembley. It's getting ugly. And we know that fake news is being used on social media to divide communities. Now, members of both the Hindu and Muslim community in Leicester have come together and have urged unity and an end to the violence. And for those, because this is what the local people in Leicester are saying, they are saying that the people who are causing this violence are not from Leicester. They're coming from out of town. And they want that to stop. Now, let's talk about the impact on Muslim-Hindu relations. How can we stop the violence? With Adnan Hussain, who's from Dire for Justice, a community organisation based in Blackburn. And I'm pleased to say Adnan Hussain is back on British Muslim TV, live from Blackburn. Assalamu alaikum, Adnan. Great to see you in the flesh again. It's been a while.
It's a pleasure. It has been a while. It's always a pleasure to be on British TV with yourself.
We're celebrating our 100th episode. What would you like to say about this historic moment here on British Muslim TV?
I'd say you're doing a brilliant job. You're certainly representing the Muslim community and bringing much needed and important updates and news to the British community, and of course keeping Muslims informed of important discussions across the world, really.
Thank you so much.
Keep on going. You're doing a great job, especially yourself, Mohammed.
Yeah, well, we'll cut that out and get that saved. Thank you so much for that. Absolutely, lots of love and respect for you, my dear brother. So first of all, what's your reaction to what we saw in what we've seen in Leicester? I mean, it's calmed down now, but the violence, the division, the hatred, how do you reflect on it?
Well, the scenes that we saw coming out of Leicester were saddening, to say the least. Disturbing, in fact, that two minority communities hailing from the same ancestral lands, with so much in common, have been brought to a point of extreme hate and violence towards one another. And in my knowledge, this is something new. Both these communities for quite a few decades have been living side by side in relative harmony with each other since the early 60s, with very little, if any, issue between them. So although there's, as you said, you made reference to fake news and so on and so forth, but there's a number of reasons that are coming out, whether they're true or false. That's something yet to be realized. However, one of the claims that has been made is that a young Muslim man was attacked by a gang of Hindu men after being asked whether he was Muslim. He was seriously and severely injured. Another reason that's come out, and
so just to say, Leicester police have confirmed that incident, and that they are investigating, and there were arrests in that case as well. So we know that particular allegation is true. Yeah.
And initially, Leicester police came out and said that the tensions were stirred as a result of a cricket match. But regardless of what the issue is, Mohammed, we're sure about one thing, and that thing is, whatever the issue is, it's not something that has been rooted in Britain. It's as a result of a foreign fascist ideology which has somehow crept into the streets of Britain, crept into the streets of Leicester, not only caused hate, but in fact has led to violent eruptions in Leicester. And such ideology has no space on our streets, has no space in Britain, and in fact, it doesn't really concern the ordinary residents of Leicester. Quite frankly, I find it all abhorrent.
And when you see the leaders of the Muslim community in Leicester, the leaders of the Hindu community coming together outside that Hindu temple and saying lots of this is from out of town, lots of people coming from out of town disturbing what for decades has been relatively peaceful. I say relatively peaceful. There's always, you do get issues between communities and between families, and that's not part and parcel of life, isn't it?
Well, of course, there's always trivial issues that communities face, and not just in a Muslim and a Hindu community. In fact, within a predominantly Muslim community, we have many issues, and we're always going to have them, but nothing on this scale where we've seen riots on the streets of Leicester. And in answering your question, I can speak to the Muslim leadership because I have some connection and knowledge of how the Muslim leadership has been acting, or in fact how it has acted following these events that have been taking place on the streets of Leicester. I'd say we can break down the reaction to two levels. The first one is the reaction of British Muslim leadership, and the second being the reaction of those on ground and events that have unfolded in Leicester. So just starting off with the events in Leicester, Mohammed, I'm sure you'll recall, nearly 20 years ago we saw the race riots. At that time I was in school. But anybody who was living in those areas, in the affected areas, will remember that those race riots brought about a toxic atmosphere.
And even Bradford, Oldham, Burnley, yeah.
Absolutely, and even still today, when you roll up into some of the streets of Burnley, you can still feel some of that toxic atmosphere, and you can still see that the community of Burnley, 20 years later, is still rebuilding and repairing from those extreme riots that we saw between Asian and white youth. So at that time, we saw dispersal orders similar to the ones that we saw last week in Leicester. There was curfews in place during the race riots. And of course, business and schools had to close down. I remember we weren't allowed out from our houses after 8 p.m. without a valid reason. And if you were found out outside your homes without a valid reason, you'd have a real prospect of being arrested. It was ugly. Them riots were ugly. And many youngsters ended up behind bars, impacting their futures, impacting their families, and indeed impacting their communities. And these youngsters went out with the sole intention in protecting their communities from a racial and violent threat. There's patterns that we in Leicester that we're presently seeing and that we saw with the last few weeks to those race riots that we saw 20 years ago. Mohammed, one thing that I'd say to our viewers, to our youngsters, nobody won after the race riots in the Northwest 20 years ago. In fact, those that partook and those that perceived a danger, a threat of violence and racism, and those that took vigilante actions ended up behind bars. They ruined their futures, no prospects of a proper and real career, and so on and so forth.
Can I just ask you
to end up?
Sorry, no, I just wanted to ask you one quick question before we've got about a minute before the break. I want to ask you about how disturbing is it the fact that we've seen slogans that have been used in India to kill, to demonize, to torture Muslim men and women being used on the streets of the UK?
I think I got the end of your question there. You were asking about the slogans of the RSS being used.
That was being used in the streets of Leicester, yeah.
Well, frankly, I find it abhorrent. There is no space for such slogans or indeed such an ideology. There's no space on our streets or indeed in our communities in Britain for such an ideology. Let's look at the history of the RSS. An ideology with connections to the murder of Gandhi, an ideology which has been inspired, in fact, by Mussolini's fascism, and that has connections to Hitler himself, coupled with the way that the current ruling party is oppressing the minorities within that country. all efforts must be made.
So Adnan, can you just stay there?
Be exhausted.
Just pause there, and we'll bring it back. We did invite members of the Hindu community here in the UK to come and join us tonight. They weren't available to come on. That invitation is still there. We'll look at this to try to bring people together. We'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll continue the conversation with Adnan Hussain. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq. We're having an exclusive conversation about the violence in Leicester. And as I said, we will, in the weeks to come, look at this again. But obviously, we've seen the slogans we were talking about. And I just wanted to reiterate that point. We did invite somebody from the Indian High Commission to come on. They weren't available to come on. We invited representatives from the Indian government in New Delhi. Nobody was available to come on. And that invitation is standing. If anybody who wants to come on and represent that viewpoint, members of the Hindu community. This is not about demonizing any particular community. It's not about demonizing the Hindu community or the Muslim community. It's about having that self-reflection. How do we stop this vicious cycle of violence and the demonization that's going on of Muslims in India and make sure that it doesn't spread anywhere else in the UK? That's what we want to do. And we're talking to Adnan Hussain, who's joining us live from the great city of Blackburn. Very diverse, mixed community there, Indians community and also Pakistani community. So, as I said, Adnan, it spread to Birmingham, to Wembley. There was allegations, fake news being spread about Nottingham. There are people who are trying to whip this up on the far right, as well as from some of those groups within Hindu-Muslim communities. How do we stop the potential for violence?
Well, this potential for violence and stopping it. Before we come on to that, I'd like to pick up on the point that leadership is key in all of this. Young Muslim men, or indeed on the opposite side, Hindu men, should not feel like as if they need to come out and protect their communities. In all of this, once the RSS thugs marched through the streets of Leicester, they disappeared. And what we've seen throughout our media is they've been successful in winding up young Muslim youths in the wrong way. And whilst the Muslims appear to have been the victims, what they now look like is, the opposite effect has taken place. So we've got to be careful about how we react. And that's where leadership comes into it. Before we never had proportionate leadership, now we do. But what we still don't have is effective and efficient leadership. Leadership is what we need to come in place. They've been put into a position of power and influence so that they can put forward how we feel. They need to take leadership in speaking to the police, the authorities, the relevant factions and organizations, putting forward and educating them as to what's actually going on. So when you say, how can we stop this from occurring and spreading out? Like I said, we don't have effective and efficient leadership. We really, really need our leaders to come out in front and tell their communities not to take vigilante action because they have everything in order and in capable hands.
Yeah, that's really, really important. And what do you make of the sort of media coverage that we've seen? I know it's been slightly, different because of the Queen's passing in the middle. What did you make of the sort of coverage, the way the media are covering it?
Yeah, of course, you pick up on a very important point there, Mohammed. The Queen's funeral, for 10 days after the Queen passes away, it's well known that all media outlets would put on the main story to cover would be the Queen's funeral. So we envisage that the entire country's media would have been in London covering the Queen's funeral, and whilst the Queen's funeral was going on, that's when the tensions increase, the heat increased and so on. And we've not really had any justice play out in the media. But by the time the media did go into Leicester, the problem we had was it just happened or appeared as though it was the Muslim youth who were the instigators. But by then, the RSS thugs had already done the damage and they had gone. And what's really sad is the Muslim youth were not the instigators. They had been calling upon the police and relevant authorities again and again and again to do something, to come and protect them. So, yeah, in short, in answer to your question, justice hasn't really been done for various reasons in the British media.
Yeah, and we know that there's an ongoing police investigation. There's many people who've been arrested, many people have been looked into this, and obviously we'll keep an eye on that in terms of Leicestershire Police. Let's look at ourselves as a community. What do you make of the response from Muslim scholars? Because I saw lots of them missing in action. Lots of them putting their head down, didn't want to be attacked or accused of something, and just generally decided to keep a low key.
Well, the Muslim Council of Britain released a statement condemning those scenes of violence on the streets of Leicester. But quite frankly, Mohammed, the response from our leadership has been ineffective, inefficient, and simply put, not enough. I strongly say that when a community ends up or feels that they need to take vigilante action, then questions need to be asked as to why. And the answer in this case is quite clear. It's because they haven't been represented enough or properly. And when there's ineffective and inefficient leadership in instances where we really, really need them to come forward and represent, then I think we as a community need to seriously start thinking about who we put forward to represent us. I'm a lawyer. Many of my clients, before they instruct me or before they instruct a lawyer, they'd ensure that they're instructing the best that money can buy, because in many instances, it's their freedom which is at stake. In the same way, when our community thinks about who should represent them, we should be looking forward and put in place the best from within our communities, the people or the individuals with the most amount of skill and tact in order to have the best representation. Again, coming to these issues and riots that we've seen in Leicester, had we had good leadership in place, perhaps it would have been a different outcome. That said, I'm not in any way saying that the leadership in Leicester has failed. What I'm saying is we could have been better nationally. We could have come forward and really represented our community and spoken to the right people in the right places to ensure that we stop this before we had riots in the streets.
And when you talk about that leadership and challenging that leadership and changing that leadership and be more reflective, where do you even start with that? Because if you want to join a political party, you have to go through their bureaucracy. We've seen what happened on Al Jazeera and the Labour files, where people who do get involved in politics are then accused of trying to take over local constituencies. I mean, how do we start and how do we get that change?
Well, I think leadership comes on every level, Mohammed. We see leadership in our mosques. We see leadership in our schools. We see leadership on every front. Of course, in political parties, we put forward representatives to represent us as well. And we have to start thinking about leadership on every level, on every front. In Leicester, even before the political leaders were giving statements, we had mosques that were joining hands with temples, leaders of temples and so on, putting forward statements, showing a face of unity. It wasn't exactly the political leadership that came forward immediately. So, there's a lot to do. There's a lot of work to do. In respect of political parties, we need to align ourselves with whatever party gives us a voice, with whatever party allows us or invites us in and gives us what we really need as a minority community. That's my position on that.
Yeah. You're from Blackburn. What's it like it's a very diverse community in Blackburn. You've got Pakistanis. We've got about 2 minutes left. Pakistanis, Indian, Muslims, Hindus. It's very diverse. What's the situation like when you look at Blackburn compared to what's going on in Leicester?
Well, in Blackburn, we have a strong community spirit, and I think we have a spirit of dialogue and good, or should I say, decent leadership in place. One where despite what's happening in Leicester, you cannot tell. There's no such atmosphere in Blackburn, and I trust that nothing will change. So to a large extent, I'd say we have been successful in Blackburn ensuring multiculturalism and in ensuring our communities are kept together wherever possible.
And what does the future hold? What does the future hold for these communities?
Well, we've seen the election results in Italy. We've seen how Europe is edging towards the far right. We, as a minority, be it the Muslim community or the Hindu community, we should not allow, and we must not allow us to be divided. We have to now is the time, more than ever before, for us to be united and for us to work together in ensuring that we put, in ensuring that we are protected as a community, as people in this country, and in tackling and fighting the far right.
Final question. I know you love cricket. We had the first series, 2020 series between England and Pakistan in Pakistan, first time in 17 years. Pakistan have won the series. What's your reaction?
I'm going to be honest with you, Mohammed. I've never really been a fan of cricket. It just happened to be that I was.
I just saw a picture of you with cricket players, thinking you're a lifelong cricket supporter. Sorry for prejudging you.
No, it's fine. I was in the UAE on some business, and I happened to be in the same hotel as the cricket team. It was a complimentary invitation to the game, which I happily accepted. I must say that was the first cricket match that I've ever been to. It was brilliant. The atmosphere was amazing. And despite what we're seeing, despite the scenes in Leicester, none of that was taking place in the UAE. Pakistani fans and Indian fans were sitting on the same rows as one another and, celebrating, chanting, and supporting their respective teams.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Adnan Hussain there, joining us live from Blackburn. Thank you so much to all my guests, to Mustafa al-Husseini, Seán McLoughlin, and Adnan Hussain. We're off air now for 3 weeks. I'm going to be in Pakistan. I'll see you back on the 26th of October. Good night. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.